Welcome to the Unspoken Truth. I'm your host, Rob Russ.
And I'm Ed Anderson.
Here we go for another day, Ed, of Unspoken Truth. And man, oh man, we got some crazy stuff going on in the world. Is there a climate change lockdown? This has been a conspiracy theory for a little while, or was it just a spoiler alert from a couple of years back? Ladies and gentlemen, if this is your first time here, welcome. It's great to have you here. And if you're back for more, welcome back. And thanks for your ongoing support. Ed and I like to go behind the stories that the mainstream media is trying to portray and give to you. And if there's an existential crisis of some sort in the world, then it must be completely and totally fake. So that's a very, very interesting thing to me as well. So don't forget, you can follow us as a podcast. Come and download on Telegram as well. Come and have a look over on Telegram. We've got a bunch of posts that go up there every day. We're also over on Twitter. How are you today, Ed? You good, mate?
Yeah, living the dream, as always. A nice day, any day I get to spend with you, Rob, is a win for me, so I'll take it.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's very kind of you, mate. I really enjoy starting my day like this as well. We've got a news story that's been circulating for a couple of weeks now, and we've kind of deliberately, well, I don't know about you, but I've deliberately kind of avoided it because I think it might be a little bit close to the electric fence that we want to be careful of. And if you haven't heard that analogy before, folks, what we believe is censorship online is like an electric fence. You can go right up to it, and if you touch it, you'll get zapped. And if you hold on to it, you'll get zapped really bad. And if you take a piss on it, you're going to get like really badly zapped. So if you go out there and saying things that are really against the mainstream narrative, that's like taking a pee on an electric fence, and that's going to end up badly for you. But I like to gatefold over those fences and get on the other side of them and have a look on what's on the other side and not even touch it. So there's been a story going around in Europe that Crimean Congo Hemorrhagic Fever is a thing, and that's been found there. So the Congolese hemorrhagic fever was something that was discovered that makes you sick. It has a 30 to 40% fatality rate. It's like getting the flu, but it makes you really, really crook. And it was discovered in Crimea, in Russia, of all things, in the early 1900s. And they couldn't distinguish between the Congolese version of it and the Crimean version of it. And that's why they call it the Crimean Congo Hemorrhagic Fever. So that's the background to the ridiculous name. And it's apparently spread by ticks and fleas and a little bit like plague in that respect. So these idiots, that the powers that be, are saying that this is spread by climate change. But there's no such thing as climate change. You can't control the weather.
Careful, man. We got to be careful here.
That was me touching the fence to see what happens.
That's right.
Well, I'm allowed to have an opinion, right? You know, YouTube can put a little thing down below that says go to the, I don't know, UN and find out what climate change means. But if I don't believe it's real, I don't believe it's real because you simply can't predict the weather, man. You can't even predict the weather like 3 days ahead. How are you going to predict the weather like 60 years into the future and saying that we're having an effect on what a load of garbage, man.
Well, climate change is real, but that's one of those duh statements. Duh. I mean, the climate in the world has been changing for millions of years since the Earth started to form. So
they got their nomenclature wrong, Ed, because it used to be called global warming, and then they realized that there was no such thing. And then it used to be called global cooling before that. Then it was global warming, and now it's climate change. Like, what? Come on.
Well, look, these terms are all poll tested, right?
By the marketers at the UN.
That's right. That's how they come up with these terms. I mean, who can argue with the idea of combating, climate change? Well, it sounds good to me. But the logic doesn't extend very far. I mean, I do not believe in man-caused climate change, and I certainly do not believe there's anything we can do to stop it. I mean, how arrogant is that to think we can control the weather? I mean, come on. But it's a nice buzzword, I guess. It's a nice look. People are buying into it. Obviously, we're spending trillions of dollars toward the scam, and small businesses have gone out of business over the attempts to change it. This is one big money wealth transfer event, and the transfer event is not going toward us; it's going toward the cabal of elites in Switzerland.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The reason I think it's a bit of a a scam here is because when all governments in the world get together and agree upon something, there's something going on there. There's an underlying nefarious driving force behind it, is the way that I can kind of think of it. Maybe there's some better words I could describe it there with. But, if you think of the reaction to COVID, how come Australia's reaction to COVID was the same as Canada's, the same as America's, the same as New Zealand's?
Words? It's a worldwide flu, man. It's not the C word. Holy cow.
I'm going to see if I can touch the fence and if I get a little zap. But look, everybody's reaction was the same to it. Now the WHO wants to come out and have universal powers to declare a pandemic, and they want to have so the idea behind it is that we have one reporting authority, and then we get together and we have one way of reacting to everything.
Hold on now, you're stepping on my report here, man.
Oh, am I? All right, let me. Why don't we take a look at that so I don't step on it too much more? Let's take a little look.
Could they actually impose a climate change lockdown on us? Well, let's talk about it. Okay, so I have to give credit to the people at Redacted for this story, but I wanted to make sure I share it with my audience to make sure that everyone saw this. So there is a lot of talk right now about a brand new disease that's significantly worse than the last one that is working its way across Europe, heading toward the UK. Symptoms of killer virus spreading across Europe, and it's highly likely to reach the UK. Okay, now I've been warning you for a long time that this whole idea of lockdowns and imposing heavy restrictions on us is not over. That the last one, the worldwide flu, was an enormously successful test run for these people. Now, successful from their point of view, right? They were able to convince the vast majority of the world population to, take poison into their bodies and stay at home. Forget the fact that a lot of small businesses have gone out of business because of that event, and they have not recovered. The idea of convincing the world population to bow to their will was enormously successful, again, from their point of view. Now, the name for this new disease is the Crimean Congo Hemorrhagic Fever. For our purposes, we'll just refer to it as CCHF. But I'm sure that they will come up with a very nice nickname for this guy pretty soon, right? Now, this is apparently an actual disease, and apparently it is actually very, very dangerous. And the symptoms are apparently, god-awful. The first evidence of CCHF dates back to the 12th century, where a description of a hemorrhagic syndrome in Tajikistan and the description of the arthropod that caused the disease appears similar to the modern-day CCHF. It was shown that the virus responsible for Crimean hemorrhagic fever was indistinguishable from the Congo virus that caused febrile illness in the Belgian Congo. Hence, linking the two names led to a new nomenclature of the CCHF virus. Okay, so apparently this disease was in slightly different forms in two areas of the world, right? And for purposes of convenience, they squished the name together to call it the CCHF. But apparently, according to the authorities, this is an actual full-on disease that is starting to work its way across Europe. Crimean Congo Hemorrhagic Fever is one of the deadly hemorrhagic fevers that are endemic in Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East. It is a tick-borne zoonotic viral disease caused by CCHF virus of genus norovirus. CCHF not only forms an important public health threat, but has a significant effect on the healthcare personnel, especially in resource-poor countries. Okay, for the sake of argument, let's just give them this, okay, that it's a really bad disease, okay? So like they say, this is a tick-borne disease, and this is where the plot starts to thicken. Climate change is helping the new deadly virus to spread across Europe. There you go. There you have it. With climate change, things get drier, things get warmer, and thus ticks proliferate, right, in that kind of environment. So they're blaming climate change on the spread of this disease. Now, there is a very important development that came out of the World Health Organization recently that sets us up for the possibility of a worldwide lockdown based on climate control, because they have to control the ticks, right? So they have to control climate change. So a large portion of the worldwide community entered into a treaty with the World Health Organization, a group of unelected people, giving them powers over the rest of the world that they can impose under certain conditions. So let's take a look at a paragraph out of that treaty that gives them these ominous powers. The parties will identify and integrate into relevant pandemic prevention and preparedness plans interventions that address the drivers of the emergence and reemergence of disease at the human-animal environmental interface, including but not limited to climate change, land use change, wildlife trade, desertification, and antimicrobial resistance. Okay, so the premise is this disease can be passed from animal to human, primarily animals like cows and pigs and things like that. So could this be their way to eliminate meat altogether? They're going to have to kill the cows in order to stop this disease jumping from cows to humans? But it doesn't matter because we got all these bugs that we can eat. So who needs cows and who needs pigs? Now, this might all sound very conspiratorial. Come on, Ed, they're not going to do this. Really? Well, we saw what happened during the worldwide flu, right? And we know the agenda that these people at these unelected international organizations have, and there has been resistance by those of us who like to eat meat, and for those of us who do drive cars that run on actual gasoline. Well, we have to be put in our place. Now, I'm not saying necessarily this is going to happen, but the possibility is out there, and you want to be forearmed. I mean, you have to wonder what kind of credibility these people have left after the disastrous effects of the last lockdown that we went through. Is there enough pushback out there by us in the world to keep this from happening? I encourage everybody to be very skeptical about the drastic new plans that they're going to have coming out in order to put us under heel. So stay tuned and let's see what happens. In the meantime, can you give me a like and subscribe? And maybe even put a comment in the section below and let me know what you think about all this. And that's my report for the day. Ed Anderson, live from Minnesota, signing out.
Well, it's not just mosquitoes we have to worry about now. There's the electric fence again. It's ticks. What the hell? What a load of shit.
Well,
this is the biggest load of shit I've ever heard, man. That's been spread through Europe by ticks because of climate change. These people think we're stupid.
Well, yeah, well, look, these are the I don't know, the logistical gymnastics they've got to go through in order. Right?
How do we join the dots of this scary disease to climate change? I know, ticks.
That's right. They're sitting around a room brainstorming. All right, so how do we get, I got it, ticks. All right, what about it? Well, ticks spread diseases, don't they? All right, well, what disease do we have available right now? Well, I heard about this obscure little disease in North Africa, and a few people have died from it. That could be something. And I don't know, they're kind of like, you feel like they're kind of reaching for excuses, right? But it does kind of paint the overall picture that these people they have objectives to achieve, and they're going to reach for any
any way they can.
Any way they can, and when they have, the thing is, they lay the groundwork with these international organizations getting countries to sign on to these treaties, right? They've gathered powers that no democratic society in the world, enjoys, but they have it. They got to give them kind of credit for that. These are evil geniuses. They were able to cobble together, and they do it first, right? So they've got the powers. Now they need the vehicle to scare people, and I think it's kind of a side issue whether this just happens to be the one that they picked. Okay, we'll use this one. It sounds scary, a 40% fatality rate. That's pretty freaking scary. So I can see them going through the list of possible diseases to scare people with. Hey, that guy's got a 40% fatality rate. There it is, winner. I mean,
so I want to shine some unspoken truth on this to dispel the fact that it's actually a conspiracy theory. Because if we rewind the clock, not so long ago, at the end of World War II, when we went into Manchuria and the Russians went into Manchuria to take back that part of China from in World War II as the war was coming to an end, they came across a Japanese outpost called Unit 731. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the unspoken truth is I need you to be ultra careful when you Google something like that. This is the most heinous, hideous thing that you've ever heard of and seen in your life. And just about everybody on planet Earth doesn't know anything about Unit 731. They were committing atrocities. The Japanese were experimenting on the Chinese population there in a biological weapons program. And they were doing experiments on the local populace there that were far worse than anything that happened in the Holocaust. Far worse than any German scientist or any German Nazi was doing. It was far worse at Unit 731. And that's why I say you need to be very careful when you look at these things and you read about this, because you cannot unsee it. And it is so unbelievably disturbing that you can't believe that these things actually happened. But the punchline to the really bad joke is when they went there and when they discovered this Unit 731, did you think they burn it to the ground? No. They gathered all the data. They gathered all the scientists and they kept it all. So they didn't have to go and do it. And who is they? It was the Americans. The Americans went there and they found it. They're the ones that came across it and they gathered all the data. It's not unlike the German rocket scientists that were gathered from the Nazi Party and brought over to actually create the American ICBM program and then the space program as well, right? These people didn't care that they were on one side or another. All they cared about was building rockets and all they cared about was the science of it. But in the Unit 731 side of it, what they were trying to do was to recreate plague. And so this is the reason why this is what we're talking about here with Crimean Congo Hemorrhagic Fever is not necessarily a conspiracy theory, because straight away when you Google that, you can see it under a microscope. Did you ever see COVID under a microscope? Never. Never, ever. Never, ever seen under a microscope, never, ever seen in a PCR test, and never seen in a... And I'm not saying that it's not real. I'm not saying that at all, not for a second. I'm just saying I've never seen a picture of it under a microscope. But instantly when I look for CCHF, I can see that under a microscope, because we know that this is a real thing. It's a pre-existing disease, and it's not something that has potentially been created through gain-of-function research at all. It already exists in nature. So when you look at it, you think, could they possibly be perpetrating and actually perpetuating something like this? And, you know, the story of Bill Gates genetically engineering mosquitoes so there's only male mosquitoes and they can no longer breed with each other, and we're going to get rid of mosquitoes and malaria altogether. But then all of a sudden has introduced malaria into the southern part of the United States when it hasn't been there for 40 years. So is this all a conspiracy theory that something like this is actually happening? I don't think so. I think it definitely already exists. We know it's a real thing. We know that COVID was a real thing. We just don't know where it came from. We don't know what happened. And we know that the whole thing was a giant psyop. And now we've got this CCHF thing. That whole thing is not a psyop. This is real. But then they're trying to join the dots of climate change. And that's where the whole narrative falls apart, because it's a load of shit. Here in Sydney, Ed, we have this thing. This thing was going on in the northern beaches. And so I live on the southern part of Sydney. So the divide is Sydney Harbour, right? From North Head and South Head and Sydney Harbour. So I live in the southern side of Sydney in Cronulla. That's really the end of Sydney before you go into the national park. When I go out the front here and I look at the beach, when I look south, I can see the national park. And that's the end of Sydney. It doesn't go any further, and that goes for probably 60 or 70 kilometres down to a place called Wollongong, and this is the southern part of Sydney. In the northern beaches of Sydney, there was a bunch of people getting really, really sick. And they were coming up with this, they were being diagnosed with this thing pretty quickly called mammalian meat allergies. So they would be, and the common theme was pretty clever how they put it all together, right? So people were presenting with these symptoms, and they were really sick. And when they got sick was when they ate red meat. And they were eating red meat, and they go, oh my God, I got the worst tummy ache in the world. And they were coming up with all of these things. And the doctors plotted everything on the maps, like, where were you? What happened? What's going on? And they're trying to figure out what's happening. And they realized that the people on the northern beaches were being bitten by ticks. It was a real thing. So these folks were outdoorish type people. They would go out for a morning walk or an afternoon walk, and they would be out in the bush. And there was a lot of ticks in that part of the world, and people were getting bitten by ticks. And they realized it was the ticks giving them the virus. And so when you get bitten by the tick and you get mammalian meat allergies, it's a little bit like Lyme disease. It's a bacteria that gets inside of you. You can never get it out of you, and you can never, ever eat red meat ever again. Oh. So I know it's like, and I remember, yeah, whatever, man, you get bitten by a tick, who gives a shit? But I remember hearing that part. That was the punchline to the really bad joke, right? It was like, oh man, really, I got to be careful, because I'm out in the bush here all the time. And all the time I'm walking through the scrub as well, where the scrub is at, it's brushing against my legs, and I only have a pair of shorts on, and I don't have a pair of gaiters on my shins or anything like that stopping it. So there could be a tick on me. But I've been in a bush for my entire life. I grew up playing in the bush as a little kid, and then I was in the military running around in the bush and walking around here for the last 20 years of my life, and I've never even seen a tick. So that's the thing, right? Like you can go your entire life and be worried about something that just simply doesn't exist, and it doesn't exist. But here's the thing that they don't tell you about ticks. The problem with the tick is when it bites you, its little fangs go in and its fangs go out this way. So it doesn't bite you inwards, its fangs face outwards because it holds on to you and it sucks your blood. And that's how the tick is there. And whenever you get a tick on you, what happens is you grab it, you twist it and you pull it off. And as you twist it and pull it off, those little fangs stay inside of you, and that's where the bacteria is, and that's what makes you sick. And that's why it's such a deadly thing, right? So in Unit 731, they were trying to recreate plague. And a lot of people think that plague was created by rats, but it's actually spread by the fleas that bite the rats. So they were doing experiments to try and recreate plague and release that into the Chinese population in Manchuria and that part of the world. It's pretty horrendous stuff. But what they don't tell you about ticks is if you ever get a tick on you, never pull it off, ever. Never, ever pull the tick off, because no matter what bacteria it's got, if it's got mammalian meat allergy there, or it's got Crimean Congo Hemorrhagic Fever or some other awful exotic disease on it, you can actually stop that from happening. And what you do is you would have seen the liquid nitrogen you can get to remove a skin tag or to remove a wart from your skin. So any chemist or pharmaceutical shop will be able to give you that over the counter. And then what you do is you freeze the tick, and before you pull it off, you stab it with the liquid nitrogen, and then you freeze it, and then you pull it off, and it'll just fall off you. It won't be stuck inside of you. So there is a preventative cure there. But I guess the point of me trying to explain all of that and explain my experience with all of these ticks and all of this garbage that's going on is that I was worried about something like mammalian meat allergies, and ticks are a real thing, and I would be in a much higher risk category than most people here in Sydney just because of my lifestyle and the activities and the locations that I actually am. But I've never ever seen a tick. And climate change or not, 45-degree day here in Sydney or not, I still haven't seen a tick ever. Never. I haven't seen one. But it's not to say that they're not there. And plenty of people get bitten by ticks and have Lyme disease and mammalian meat allergies and a bunch of different things like that. But climate change is not exacerbating more ticks or not, because I don't see them in winter and I don't see them in summer. I'm in locations where I should be able to see them, and I don't see them. And I promise you, now I go out there, I'm going to get bitten by 50 ticks and end up not being able to eat a steak ever again. That's kind of how it is. I don't know. It's just such a long bow to draw to say that because the weather is warmer, whether that's from, just put the climate change argument aside for a second. If the weather is warmer because there's a heat wave, and that happens all the time, right? There's a heat wave, the weather's warmer. Does that mean there's more ticks? Well, statistically, probably. But does that mean more people are going to get bitten by ticks? Well, if there's more ticks, probably they're going to get bitten by them. But come on, man. It's just such a long bow to draw. It just seems like such bullshit to me.
When I was growing up, we used matches to get the ticks off.
Is that a real thing in Minnesota for you, like ticks?
Oh yeah, ticks. Yeah. In Minnesota is especially when you get outside the Twin Cities here. Yeah, it's a very rural, lots of lakes, a lot of trees. It's a tick-friendly state. Especially for the north of you. Yeah, so I grew up. I did a lot of Boy Scouts and a lot of camping and canoeing.
Same thing. Yeah.
So it wasn't uncommon to get a tick. So, but the way we did it, we knew not to pull it off. We'd take a match, strike the match, blow it out, and while it's still hot, tap it on that. Yeah, and then it would release itself, right? It doesn't want to be there anymore. So, look, the story is not about ticks, right? And it's not about the disease. This is
look over here while we
exactly. This is just the disease they happened to pick off the long list that they could have picked as the next scare tactic. And no, this is about control. This is about the lockdown. So, it's going to be kind of curious to see whether there's more of a pushback this time around.
Imagine if they told you you had to go into a lockdown because of ticks.
Well, of course they won't say it like that, right?
But really, that's how ridiculous it is, right?
It is.
Climate change has caused like an explosion in the population of ticks, and we don't want people to get CCHF, so everybody has to stay at home now for the next 3 weeks.
Well, here's the logic that I'm worried about. That they're going to say, all right, well, we know that ticks like cows and pigs,
Horses and pigs and
Yep. So we got to kill all the cows. So this could be their big ticket item for getting rid of meat once and for all, because right? This is how can we get these people to stop eating meat? Well, we can't really. A lot of them just really like the meat. Well, then we just got to get rid of the meat somehow. Well, all right. Well, we got the Netherlands on board. We got Ireland on board. But we still got the rest of the world to get rid of their cows. So what can we do? Well, we got to make these cows dangerous somehow. How's dangerous? That so we have to have a way to get rid of the cows. So that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the next big proposal to kill off millions of cows for the sake of national health. And right, because they got to come up with a good reason that people will buy. Well, what can we do? I had to take the jab 3 years ago so that I wouldn't make my kids sick. Well, now I got to get rid of the cows so that to save the world. I don't know. That's right. It becomes a moral imperative to do things.
I'm laughing, but what it is, it's the spoiler alert, right? So when all of these countries come together and say the same thing, that's when you know that this thing is fake. That's when you know this thing is not real. I'm also laughing, like I'm thinking about, when you see a cow, does it have a tick on it? I don't know. Maybe I've never looked that closely at a cow. What about a horse or a pig? Probably. I don't know. I've never looked that close. But when you say like ticks on animals, one thing that comes to my mind here in Australia is emus. Emus are known for like being covered in ticks in the bush, right? When you see, footage of a documentary and it zooms into the face of this crazy emu, it's got like ticks all over its face, and that's like, oh man, that looks like pretty horrendous and pretty nasty. The minute the Australian government comes out and says it's culling emus, we know we're in trouble, man.
Yeah. And where did it end? How about pets? How about dogs? Do we have to get rid of the dogs now too?
Well, think of that, right? Think of pet owners and dog owners. How many times have you ever had a tick on your animal, on your dog or your cat? Like, I can think of the dogs that I had when I was growing up. The answer is never. But they're going to tell you that this is a problem, and they're joining the dots to climate change. It's just such a long bow to draw. But my worry, Ed, is this, that people are just so unbelievably gullible. They're so gullible, and they just cannot think for themselves for some reason. And, to begin when COVID happened, I was psyoped like everybody else. I was like, oh man, maybe this is a real thing. Maybe I should do what I was told. But then very quickly I realized that, hold on a minute. None of it has got to do with keeping me safe. All of it has got to do with controlling me. And that's when I realized that keeping me safe is not the government's job. The government's job is to keep the barbarians at the door with the military. That's their job. That's the only way they can get. Everything else is like up to me. Like keeping me safe from a medical perspective, that's not the government's job, man. So when governments around the world come together to protect the population and keep them safe from themselves because of some medical thing, that's a psyop. That's the reason where I go, well, maybe this thing is real and it is in society and people are getting sick. Or let me give you the benefit of the doubt. But it's up to me to protect myself. There's thousands of diseases that I could get. I could step on a rusty nail and get tetanus because I don't go and get a tetanus shot. Or I could get hepatitis, or I could get AIDS, or I could get the flu, or I could catch a cold. There's like thousands of things that I could get and things that could go wrong to me that I could catch, meaning get sick from the outside in, not from the inside out. But they've never tried to protect me from any of those things ever before. So why are they doing this now? And this is exactly the same thing. The minute that governments around the world come together to try and protect everybody for their own medical benefit, gotta wonder.
Okay, well, so this is the question that I have for you. I'll just throw it out, and I want your opinion on this, Rob. Okay, so when we had the worldwide flu, stop calling it the C word, man. Just Okay. So when we had that worldwide flu, that was a unique event. That was a first time in history kind of event. Never before in human history had we had that kind of a worldwide global effort to take on a particular issue, right? And we never had that much. I don't think the world has ever been united behind any other topic in the world, right? Behind that one topic. It kind of brought the world together in that regard. You know, we're all focused on defeating, an unseen enemy, so to speak. And so people, because of that, because it was portrayed as an existential threat, people said they took it seriously. And so, the vast majority of the global population did acquiesce, right? They did agree to take in to these extreme measures, taking in poison voluntarily.
They did their part.
They did their right. They did their part. But now we know it's a proven fact that that most of the information that we were given were flat out lies. They were built on lies. However, so I think that a lot of people through channels like us that try to give the unspoken truth, more people today are more aware of the lies that were told to them than before it started. But I'm wondering whether, because like you said, a lot of people are still very, very gullible and very naive, and they tend to accept things just because of groupthink, just because the media tells them, just because an authoritative figure tells them so. And so I'm wondering whether this next time around, is it going to be easier to get people to acquiesce because they've been through it already? So it's kind of normal to give away freedoms and to do extreme things, or is it going to be more difficult because people now are more skeptical? So what do you think?
I think that's a great question. Where I go with that is, last time around, what they did is they took away our freedoms. They just took away a little bit here, a little bit there, and they showed you what they're really capable of, meaning arresting pregnant women in their home for putting posts on Facebook about something that they don't like, meaning bashing old ladies and pepper spraying 70-year-old women because they've got no other recourse. They can't pay their bills. They don't know what to do, so they go to a protest. They use the long arm of the law, and the police are just mindless drones that can't think for themselves. And those police are the ones that are responsible for implementing government policies that mean nothing. And they've since walked back at least here in Australia, they've walked back all of the fines, they've walked back all of the rhetoric, and they've admitted that they've actually lied to us. They admitted it. They didn't apologize. Didn't apologize to me for destroying my two businesses, which still haven't recovered. Gone. Just haven't come back. And no apology, no anything, no compensation, no nothing. And all of it was based on a lie. I think that during that process, when they were busy doing that, they were taking away your rights, and you were allowing them to take away your rights. So next time around, with Crimean Congo Hemorrhagic Fever, climate change, or some other BS thing that they come up with, people don't have their right. Their rights have been taken away already. So they'll use those idiot police, those drones who can't think for themselves, who apply exactly, all they are just dull instruments and dull instruments of the law that can't think for themselves. And I think of police officers that are enforcing those rules as the dumbest people on planet Earth, because they mindlessly follow the orders that they've been given. And I believe that that's what will happen again. I believe that we don't have a choice, because it's the police that are enforcing the laws, not the government. Because the government just makes the rules, and the police are the ones that actually enforce it. If they say you can't go 5 kilometers from where you live, and you drive 6 kilometers out of there, who picks you up? It's not a politician, it's the cops. And the cops are just like, I'm just doing my job. You're not just doing your job. You can't think for yourself, and you can't think outside the box that you're in and realize that the government is telling you to do something to take away all of our human rights. And the people that fought for this country and the people that made this country great, you're just ruining it with every time you write a fine for somebody, every time you enforce a law like that. And I've just got a massive disdain for law enforcement here in Australia based on what they've done. No apologies, no anything. Destruction of society, bashing people, trying to destroy them financially, trying to destroy their reputations, threatening consistently people that just have an opinion, silencing free speech. I think, to your point, Ed, the next time round, it will be much easier for the government to get people to comply. And I believe that because of the heavy-handed approach of the government, last time around, people will go, oh, we don't want that to happen again. We'll just do as we're told. But that's the whole reason that it keeps happening, because you keep doing as you're told. And I'm not saying that you need to have a revolution or fight back against the police or fight back against the government, because it comes down to the individual. But, you know, you and I often talk about this off air, but, you know, it's a time to talk about it now. But when it comes, you know, you've got convictions, but to have the courage of your convictions and to stand up for yourself at the time you have to stand up for yourself is really, really hard. Whether that's medically, whether that's physically, whether that's economically, it doesn't matter. No matter what happened, I was never, ever going to inject something into myself. If someone was going to try and hold me down and stab me with something like that, I would fight as if it was the last day of my life and resist. And I would resist everything that the government tells me to do. And I would never, ever, ever, ever again in my entire life ever do anything that the government tells me to do. Ever. Never. Never, ever. After the lies that they told to us, you know, I'll give you another example, Ed. Another practical, real example. I've got a letter here from Energy Australia, and it says information about your energy bills. And it says the pretense of, this is why I'll never, ever listen to the government ever again. And this is not me bitching about the government. Anthony Albanese was elected as the new Prime Minister because he said that all Australians would get a $275 discount on their electricity bill. Now, I've got a bill from the energy company, from Energy Australia, for heaven's sake. By the way, this is not really their fault. This is the government's fault creating the conditions. And the headline on it says, your electricity bills should increase from 1st of August 2023. What does this mean for the cost of my bill? For the average household in your area, we estimate that this would result in an increase of approximately $287 over the year. But right now, I've seen an increase in my quarterly bill go from about $500, approximately, give or take about $50, to latest bill, $700.
Whoa!
So that's a $200 increase per quarter, which means an $800 increase in my bill, which is far in excess of what they're suggesting here. And of course, it's based on how much electricity you use. It's based on, you got the aircon on in winter or some whatever, right? So it's based on all of those things. Like I get that. But the point is, the government lied to me again. The politicians that stood up there and said, we're here for Australia, we're going to do this, we're going to help you do that, we're going to make it better, we're going to fix the divided nation that we have. The government's divided the nation more than ever before. They've lied to me about electricity bills. Have you ever in your entire existence received a letter in the mail from your energy company that says your electricity bills should increase? And it says, thanks for being with us. The update is about rate changes coming up that will affect you. Listen to this. We acknowledge that it's likely to be unwelcome news for you and many of our other customers. Are you kidding me? Imagine a company, imagine if you were a company that you had to go to millions of your customers and say, sorry everybody, we have to lift the bills because of the government policy. Otherwise, there's no electricity, there's no energy.
Well, the thing is, okay, so there's probably no competition for you to turn to, right?
Well, you know, they're retailers. So there's probably 4 or 5 other retailers that I could go to. But, you know, they're two sides of the same coin. And there's really nothing. It's not their fault that the prices are going up. It's the government policies. So I can't blame Energy Australia because they're the retailer. They're buying it off the wholesaler and passing it on to us. And the wholesale cost of electricity is more. It says it in that letter.
Well, there is good news here, Rob. You know, if they get around to killing all those cows and pigs, so you can't eat your meat anymore, you transition to a bug-based diet, you can do all your grocery shopping on your morning walk, you know, with those big bugs.
I can just pick the ticks off and eat them as I go.
That's right. There you go. Fry them up, and you'll save a lot of money on groceries.
Reminds me of those chimpanzees sticking the stick into the termite nest, you know. Like,
yeah. That could be you by the end of the year. Yeah.
You never know.
Sweetheart, let's go to lunch. Bring your stick. Yeah.
There it is. You know, I'll sum up my final thoughts here for you, Ed, by saying that I lost complete faith in trust in Australia, completely and totally. and not just the government, but people. Because if I just Google how many people got injected over the last couple of years, it's the statistics that the government show me. I don't know how true it is. It could be completely fake. That could be an entire psyop in itself. But when I look at how many people have been injected, it's something in the vicinity above 90%. I can't remember exactly, but it's more than 90%. So that says to me that 9 out of 10 people around me cannot think for themselves. 9 out of 10 people around me are so unbelievably brainwashed that they would believe what Scott Morrison says, and those lying health ministers, they believe that. And I think that is a complete and total loss of faith to me. When Anzac Day in 2020 was shit canned, and I couldn't go to a memorial service to remember the people that had died on behalf of our country for the freedoms that we had, but they allowed a Black Lives Matter protest, which has got nothing to do with Australia, to happen at scale. I knew that this country had turned the corner and it was never going back. And it was from then on that I recognized that just about every person that I encounter here in Australia is a fucking psyop zombie. And that's how I refer to people now. I refer to people like they are zombies, because they're zombies of the government, and their brains have been completely zombified by mainstream media. And now that all of the truth has come out, I can say that they're zombies, and they would admit, yeah, we were zombified by the mainstream media. And every other day I see on my Twitter and Telegram and other things reminders of these things, of journalists in mainstream media saying, do your part, roll up your sleeve, go home, stay here, do this. And they're all like pretending like everything's okay. And I thought, well, that didn't age well, did it? I was thinking about this the other day. I know one guy who had to go back to the UK, and because he's from the UK, to see his family. He got double jabbed and had a heart attack. I know another guy, his son had been double jabbed, went into hospital, was told by the doctors, so the boy's dad was told by the doctors that you need to get his affairs in order and he's not going to make it through the night. And he said, well, can I visit him? He said, no, you can't come in here because you haven't been jabbed. He went and got 2 jabs immediately to go and see his son and say goodbye to his son, because his son was going to die, and then fell ill and was ironed out flat for about a week, and then a couple of days later had a cancer scare. I know a woman who rolled up her sleeve and put the things on Facebook and said, look at me, I've had my booster, and don't pass go, you went straight to stage 4 breast cancer, double mastectomy, thanks for coming. I know another guy ended up with diabetes. I know just about every person that I know, every zombified zombie that I know that followed the rules and did their part, had an adverse reaction of some description. And I was like, what did you think was going to happen? I have no sympathy at all. Not even a little bit. I don't give a fuck. I think it's the funniest thing of all. Like, I'm one of the purebloods. That's it.
Well, to defend them a little bit, in the early days, we didn't know about the adverse effects until much later, right? So
I smelled a rat, man. I smelled a rat.
Me too. You have no idea how much pressure that I got in order
oh, really?
To get the job. Oh, yeah. I remember I went to a Christmas dinner there with the family that I see once a year, and the cousins. I was getting preached to about why how I was being inconsiderate and selfish for not getting the double jab.
Inconsiderate. No one ever considered me. Yeah, go on the train or the subway for 10 minutes. See how considerate people are. Almost punch on every time I go on there.
And look, in those early days, there was a solid year there where I did go back and forth. I was trying to be open-minded. I was considering it, but I was skeptical. So I wanted to wait and see who else died, who else,
What's the harm in waiting, right? That's the strategy. What's the harm in waiting? Just wait.
Right. Now, it just so happens that I work from home. I live at home, right? So I don't have to be out and about as much as some people have to go to work. But listen, the way they painted it was, if you wanted to live your life in any real way, you had to get it done, right? Look at all the people in New York, any major city, where firemen were being fired if they didn't get the jab, right? First responders if they didn't want, nurses, right?
My missus lost a job because of it.
There you go. So so people have to make a tough choice. This is where we go back to, the power of your conviction. When you really believe in something, it's easy to have integrity and believe in something when it's not being challenged. The real test of your, moral fortitude is what happens when you're actually faced with a tough choice. One last point that I would like to make about this topic is this next time around, the stakes are going to be raised. Okay, so in addition to the other stuff, probably having to take some more poison. Probably
they're raising them with climate change, man.
That's right. So in addition to all the stuff they put on us last time, they're going to do additional things, like they're going to confiscate large pieces of land, like they did in the Netherlands, for the sake of climate change, right? And they're going to start killing out mass herds of cows, and for the sake of climate change. They're going to start doing things that really it's going to accelerate the decline of our standard of living. But it's all going to be done, in our best interest. But I promise
to keep you safe.
But don't worry, the guys in Davos, these guys will still have their stakes. They will still fly their planes. So don't worry about those. They'll be just fine. Thank you very much. So that's
just remember. Yeah, that's a good last thought, right? And I'm glad you raised that keep you safe bit, because just remember, if you don't do it, the police will come around and keep you safe with their baton and their pepper spray and their handcuffs. They'll keep you safe. They're the people that are designed to keep you safe from, a medical problem. Are you kidding me? Like, there's something very, very, very wrong with Australian society, man. It's been broken, and it's never, ever going back. And the Voice has just divided it even more. But, to your point, Ed, I think you asked the question, and this is my final thought. The Voice to Parliament has completely divided Australia here, but support for it is falling. There was a poll out yesterday that 41% of people would say yes and 48% of people would say no, and there's about 11% that were still undecided. And they say the undecided people want to say no, but they don't want to do that because they're going to be scared they're going to get called racist because they've got an opinion. But apparently having an opinion is racist. Apparently going to the gym is actually racist now as well. I'm a white supremacist because I go to the gym and pump weights and I want to be fit and healthy. So something's really busted in our society, man, badly. It's never going back. But that poll kind of shows me that people are waking up a little bit. They don't give a shit about the government narrative that they're trying to perpetuate, because what they care about is the things that matter, cost of living. And there was a by-election held on the Gold Coast here in Australia over the weekend, and the Labor Party were ousted. And the Labor Party go, oh, it's a safe Liberal seat anyway. We were never going to win that. We were never in the race. It wasn't a swing to the Liberal Party. It was only a 2% swing, and they're making all these bullshit excuses. And it's like, well, maybe people just don't want to deal with your Labor policies and your garbage because they're awake to it. So maybe my loss of faith in humanity is unfounded, and maybe Australia can be a great place once again like it once was. I doubt it, but it's possible. So here's to hoping. What do you reckon?
Yeah, well, this is going to be an interesting study in human psychology, and with this next big, whether it's this particular issue or a similar issue where they're doing another power grab. It'll be interesting to see how the world reacts this time around. And arguments can be made for both sides. On the one hand, it might be easier because people are normalized to it, or it might be much more difficult for the powers to be because people are starting to wake up. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. It'll be curious. But I would encourage all of our listeners, at the very least, everyone, be skeptical with any new dramatic plan that these unelected officials come up with. At the very least, be skeptical.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's wrap this one up. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to leave a comment down below. Let us know what your thoughts are. And come on over to Telegram and also to Twitter and follow along there, because we post a couple of times a day over there, and you can engage with us in an uncensored way where we do speak the unspoken truth over there with no fear of being censored, struck off, or struck down for no particular reason other than having an opinion, which seems completely ridiculous to me. Don't forget, we're available as a podcast as well. So wherever you're getting your favorite audio content, just have a look for The Unspoken Truth and you can get a copy of this show in your ears each and every day. All right, Ed, thanks for this one, mate. We'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.